Hello everyone, I'm Steve Esposito. I am the Dungeon Master slash Game Master for a podcast called Copperpiece. Chances are you've heard of us, and that's actually probably why you're here. So I'm going to give you a quick welcome to our very strange YouTube channel. You are here because you're interested in Dungeons and Dragons, and probably other tabletop RPGs. And based on the title of this video, you're going to want to know what to bring for the first time you guys play Dungeons and Dragons. Although, if you are not a first-time player, I do have some stuff towards the end of the list for different things you might want to bring in the future if you are an experienced player and you want to bring more stuff to the table. The first thing you're going to want to bring is your imagination. All of the games kind of have this theater of the mind type of element to them. Sure, you may have battle maps and miniatures and stuff like that, but if you can't use your imagination, you're really not going to get too far. The DM is going to describe the scenery to you. They're going to explain the attacks, if you get hit, if something really bad happens to you, they're going to explain it all. Having an imagination and feeding into that is very much a big thing. It's almost paramount to the whole experience. If all you see is just figures on a map and the DM is trying to describe to you things that are happening and you're not going for it, you're not going to have a good time. It'll be a very awkward campaign, I'm just going to say. And the other thing too is your imagination should not be something that you're scared to do. Whenever I have new players come to the table, they sometimes are hesitant to kind of act on their imagination because they think it's weird. I try to put it into a sense of scale for them. I kind of give them a little bit of what it's like. I say things to them like, well, if you're too scared to do this, I imagine this entire world in my mind. I have a city that gets consistently beaten up by demons in my mind. Trust me, you have nothing to worry about. You can put your anxiety to the side and we can do this. Of course, that's just going to be a whole different video in the future, most likely. The next thing you should have is the player's handbook. This thing right here. You should have this. It's incredibly important that you have that book because it's going to tell you all the rules of the game. It has pretty much everything you need to get started, essentially. And they're pretty inexpensive. I've seen them range from $30 to $50. There's constantly sales on them. D&D is really established. You can pretty much walk into any bookstore or anything like that and you can find them there. This book is your reference guide. You're going to go back to it a couple of times, especially when you're starting, to kind of understand certain rules and aspects. A good third of the book is just your spells. See, I tab out my book, as you can see up here, and this whole back section right here, that's just spells. And the good thing for having your own book as well is that there's not just one book being handed out throughout the entire table. Some DMs might be crazy and have one book per player, but that's not usually a case that happens. You definitely want to have your own book because you don't want to be the guy that's just like, hey man, it's my turn. I gotta look at this book for 20 minutes before I decide what to do. I mean, that's also a thing that we can also talk about in a different video, which is good things to do at the table. We'll talk about it somewhere else. So you have your imagination, you have your book, and you got a pretty sunny disposition. What do you get next? We're gonna need dice. Dice come in various sizes, shapes, colors. They look like potion bottles for some reason because people wanted that. If you're a first-time player or you're fairly new and you don't really roll dice that much, don't go crazy over dice. You're gonna see these dice that have crazy styles and stuff all over them, and that can be a problem because you might not be able to see the numbers. Also, those sets of dice tend to be a little pricier. When you just buy a simple pack of dice for $5 at your local comic book store or any store that also sells the player's handbook, you can't go wrong with it. It's just a regular set of dice. You don't need anything crazy. Chances are, if you're playing and you're brand new to the game, your DM might actually have dice as well. I know this because as a DM, I always have dice on me. I usually bring it for situations when new players don't have dice, and that kind of makes up for it. Although sometimes people steal my dice. So yeah. If you're really into the game and you want to get more dice in the future, you can always buy pounds of dice. It sounds ridiculous, but it's definitely a thing. You can just buy a big-ass bag full of dice, and it's usually pretty cheap. The other thing, too, is that there's various different applications where you can download dice to your phone, but it's not as fun as, the real thing. There's nothing better than, rolling the dice and hitting a natural 20 and be like, oh, and everyone sees it. You're on your phone, you just kind of hit a button and got one. Now, if it's your first or second time kind of down the road, one thing I would advise not doing when it comes to dice, and that's buying metal dice. Sure, they look really cool, but they can be expensive, and if you're not playing a lot, it's probably not worth it. You can probably spend the money, the difference of the money, or whatever it is, on other things. Just go ahead and get yourself a decent notebook and some pencils. Notebooks are incredibly cheap. I mean, you don't need something fancy notebook-wise. You can get a marble notebook from the store, probably about $1.50 or something. And the reason why you want these utensils is because you're gonna need them. You're gonna want to remember names, locations, perhaps instead of writing stuff on your character sheet and making it look like someone was trying to hide some sort of secret decoded message from Nicolas Cage, you can just write it in your notebook instead. We're talking about things like stats, feats, class and race features, maybe a little bit of your background. Notebooks are going to be your best friend when it comes to playing any sort of tabletop RPG. The biggest thing for me is also inventory when it comes to notebooks, because you're going to need to keep track of like all the things you have, and like I said, the sheet on the back is not big enough to hold everything. So you're going to end up with a bunch of these eraser marks, and then Nicolas Cage is not going to be able to make out anything you said. Now, I cannot tell you how many times that my players forget things. You've listened to the podcast, hopefully. They forget things. In the Curse of Strahd campaign, there's a couple items that my players have to find. And of course, they're not just like, oh, go find him in this tower. It's some crazy riddle. Since they don't go back to the notes because they never wrote it down, they kind of had to figure some things out. This is when I do the lovely DM thing and give them a nudge in the right direction. And since then, they have done nothing but always check their notes. Now, another thing you need to bring to the table is an open mind. Imagination and open minds are two totally different things. Your imagination is you playing out the scene in your head. Your open mind is accepting the things that are going to happen. You're going to have bad rolls. It's just a thing that happens. You're going to get natural ones, and bad things are going to happen. You just kind of have to deal with it. The ability to deal with it is super important because you have to realize a couple of facts. You are not the only person playing. You are a character, and you have a party. And those people are going to want to play with you. They're not going to play for you. Tabletop games, in a way, are about confrontation. Some of them are going to be vocal. Some of them are going to be more violent. Keeping an open mind also allows you to look at your options and what you can do. Someone hits you in the shoulder, walking by you, you can go lash out against them, or you can kind of let it go. It's really all up to you. But you also want to keep your party members kind of there in your mind as well. Do what's right for the whole team and not just you. Once again, that's just a whole other video though. For example, in Copperpiece, we have the character of Axel Rose, who always breaks his weapon. But whenever that happens, there's not really a big fight about it. It's just like, okay, that happened, I will have to figure out something else. Also, I feel like that plays an interesting part to the story where, because he's broken about 5 weapons by now, the rest of the players are really hesitant to give him the Sun Sword in fear that he might break that too. What about the players who are a little bit more experienced? What about you guys? Well, if you're still kind of new to any tabletop RPG, specifically I'm going to talk about D&D, here's some additional items that you can bring to the table that might enhance your experience. If you are a magic user, and chances are you're going to be using magic because almost every class uses magic besides maybe 2, you're going to need spell cards. So what spell cards do is that they are a card that has your spell on it. It has the name, the components, what kind of spell it is, and also additional details such as the damage that it does and what damage you can do at higher levels. Some spells you have to prepare ahead of time, so it's nice to just have like a little deck of cards that you can pull from when you need them. Having to open up the book every time you want to look at a spell is a pain in the ass, and yes, I did say get the player's handbook so you can look at the stuff, but spell cards makes it so much easier. The next thing, it's a little pricier, but I would say a tablet is a wonderful thing to have. I own the Amazon Fire tablet. It is a good tablet. It does what I need it to do. I've read comics on it. I have my player handbooks. I have some player sheets on here. I have an initiative tracker on here. It's great. On the player side, you can easily access things like D&D Beyond, which is a great character creator. It helps you manage your character, but it's a little work. That doesn't beat pen and paper. It has spell apps on there where you can organize your spells. And you can play Baldur's Gate on there, which is a great game. A tablet is a wonderful device because it helps you keep everything in one place. But the downside is that it runs on a battery. So if your battery dies out, you're kind of stuck. Nothing really does beat a good notebook and pen, but, to each their own. The other thing with tablets is, though, some of them can be pretty pricey. The more expensive doesn't necessarily mean the better it is. You really got to look at that. Your mileage is going to vary very much with that. Including the fact that not all apps are on all platforms. iOS has this wonderful app called Fight Club, which is great, but it's not on the Android platform, so Dice trays are also really nice to have. I do like my dice trays. The dice tray essentially just keeps the dice from dancing around the table like it's Kanye West at a club and his song just came on. And the great thing too is that they're relatively inexpensive. You can make your own for pretty cheap. I personally have a box that used to hold whiskey bottles, like little tiny whiskey bottles, and I use that as my dice tray, and also it holds my pencils and stuff. You can use the top lid of a shoebox if you wanted to. One thing I will say about that is if you use a box with felt on it and you use metal dice, be careful. Some of the metal tends to stick to the felt pretty bad, and it doesn't look good. The next thing I'm going to say to enhance your experience is going to be miniatures. If you play on battle maps and stuff, that's really cool. I always tend to believe that might be the best way to go sometimes. So it's nice to have like your own little character representing you on the table. The only thing is that you might go crazy because there's a lot of different miniatures out there. Some other DMs will just have a box full of minis that you can just pull from when need be. If you're looking for a particular type, there's always eBay. They have a ton of variety when it comes to those. And some of them are also painted, which is really cool as well. You can even find like really just blank canvas characters through companies like Reaper and stuff, where they just have like little characters you put together, you glue them real fast, and you paint them up. And if you want to go out painting them, that's like a whole different thing. Don't follow me for that. I cannot paint for the life of me. Totally not qualified for that. And if you really want some high-end quality, there's always a website called Hero Forge. On that website, you can create your own miniature and you can have them send it to you. Or you can download a file, go to your local library, and print it out. Downloading your file costs about $9. Getting an actual miniature can go as far as $20 to $35 to even $40 or $50. So once again, your mileage may vary with that as well. Definitely last, but certainly not very least, if you are a player and you're looking for more things and you really want to dive into D&D, then where else could you go besides more source books? There's literally a handful of source books out there. Xanathar's Guide to Everything is probably the greatest out there right now. That book gives you way more options for your class, as well as some additional references and stuff for races and also additional spells. There are more books out there that are more DM focused, such as the Guide to Monsters, which has some additional races that you can play as, but like everything else, they can be a little bit pricey. You might not need all of them, and you shouldn't just go crazy and just buy a bunch of this stuff after playing 1 or 2 times. Those source books are something for people who have played for a little bit and they kind of want more variety when it comes to different campaigns or different things. Although I will say the Xanathar's Guide is almost necessary because it gives your characters additional options. Also, it plays really well into your character background. The Xanathar's Guide is amazing for that. I mean, that's it. That's all the stuff I got for you for this particular video. I'll do one for GMs, things that GMs should bring to the table as well. That one might be a little crazy. So thank you for watching. If you guys want to, please leave some questions, leave some comments, maybe some Shakespearean insults, if you will. Hit the subscribe button if you like stuff like this. Hit the bell for something. Buy me some Taco Bell. I'm always hungry. So thank you, folks. We will see you next time.